Tonight finds us again in the book of Judges, today near the end of the book. There's only two stories left in the book of Judges, and if these are the two stories, that's enough. It's the story at the end of the book, and there's two of them that are out of order. They're not chronological with the rest of the book. They take place over a span of time that it encompasses a bit more than just the chronology of the Judges. And so they're not told in that order, but they're told to illustrate the terrible conditions morally of the people and just the terrible things that some of the tribes of God's people did. Now, we'll have the third of these independent stories after the book of Judges. The independent story where things go well is the book of Ruth. Of course, it doesn't start off well, but it ends well. And so in Judges, the people needing deliverance. And as we saw, they were afflicted by outsiders. And then in the latter part of the book of Judges, they just cut the middlemen out and just start afflicting themselves. And then in the book of Ruth, we have some people delivered from affliction by faithful action and a faithful man. So that'll be the next four studies. That's the plan. Two in the book of Judges, then two from the book of Ruth, and we'll be complete with this section of Scripture. So in chapters 17 and 18, the first of these two stories, and I like to call these two stories at the end of the book of Judges the Appendix of Evil, because why not? It's these stories first of the tribe of Dan and a very mercenary priest. Of course, the people of Dan are pretty mercenary too. And then there is that terrible atrocity and abuse and desecration of bodies and the like that basically ends up in a civil war and one of the tribes being wiped out. So we have that to look forward to in our second appendix of evil. But tonight, the first appendix of evil, Dan and the mercenary priest. And we start off, as all good Bible stories do, with people stealing from mom. Yeah, that's where we start, and then it gets worse. So chapter 17, we start with Micah and some theft. Now, there was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse in my hearing, well, behold, the silver's with me." Hey, sorry, Mom, I took it. And I guess he didn't want to be under Mom's curse. Who wants to be under Mom's curse? And so he fesses up. The silver's with me, I took it. And Mom says, as indulgent mothers everywhere have always said when their son makes the slightest bit of progress toward decent conduct, his mother said, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." Yeah, okay. Hey, son, bless you for telling me. Okay. And so he offers up to his mother restitution of what he stole. He then returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now, therefore, I return them to you." So, hey, about that stealing from me, that's fine. Bless the Lord with it. Make yourself an idol. Okay, thanks, Mom. Let's make an idol. Just in so many ways, absolutely unbelievable. The amazing thing is this 1,100 pieces of silver. I mean, I would have trouble laying hold of that now. If you try to figure out what this would have been in purchasing power and value, because it is monstrously difficult to make ancient money into new money, to make ancient amounts make any sense for us. But in a little bit, they're going to use some of that money, I think about a quarter of it or so. They're going to use that to buy a suit of clothes, buy priestly clothes, and give somebody a yearly maintenance for them to serve as priest. And the clothing and the money was 10 shekels a year. And so he stole 1,100 when you can hire a fella for a year, give him his room and his board, and give him a stipend for 10 a year, and he stole 1,100. About the best I can figure is this may have been $1 million-ish that was taken in equivalent currency. And even if I'm wrong by half either way, it's just astounding how much he took and what mom just, oh, don't worry about it and go make yourself an idol. And they take about a quarter of it and they make themselves an idol. So they set up a $250,000 worship place. Now that, right? And today, if you're going to build a place you're going to make an idol and a place to worship, I mean, wouldn't you need to start with a $250,000? It's just amazing. It's amazing how many commandments here are violated that don't steal, that don't make idols, the instruction of Moses to not make other places of worship, and just on it goes, the violations of God's commandments and God's law in this. So verse 4, let's go ahead and get this idol made and set up. And so when he returned the silver to his money, or to his mother, probably Freudian there, returned the silver to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the silversmiths to make a graven image. So about a quarter of the money goes for the idol. Again, do not make for yourself an idol of the likeness of anything in heaven above or of earth beneath or the water beneath the earth. Right, Exodus 20 and verse 4, commandment number 2. And so she gave it to the silversmiths. They made it a graven image, a molten image, and they were in the house of Micah. I got to say, this theft, as far as financially, has turned out really well for him. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod. So the ephod is the priestly garments, and this would have been something of great value, the fine linen, and then usually the ephods would have plates, like patches, like plates of gold with various inscription on them, and precious jewels encrusted into the garments. You think about, well, it's no new thing that priests like to wear fancy robes, and so this would have been the fancy. And so he made the ephod and household idols, notice the plural, and he consecrated one of his sons that he might become his priest. And so he sets up one of his boys as the priest from this worship center that is from the money that they first stole from grandma but then gave back. And it's just, what in the world? And then this explanation of verse 6, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. I guess so. Just whatever you think, right? Silver idols, theft, make your own family the priest, just whatever. And so we think about even in Israel, when they had bad kings, they had Jehu or Josiah. Josiah was one of the good ones. Asa, I think, about some of those guys who weren't great, but they were against idolatry. This would not have flown in the times of the kings because the kings would have put a stop to some of this. But they didn't have a king, and so they all got to make their own rules. And sometimes we don't like the government's rules, but imagine life with none of them. And so they go along this way for a bit, and then they decide to, we got a chance to upgrade priest. So verse 7, now there was a young man from Bethlehem. That'll be in the book of Ruth and come big part of the story later. But from the city of Judah, there was of the family of Judah, a man who was a Levite. So there was a Levite who was staying in Judah, and he was there. And in verse 8, that man departed from the city, from Bethlehem in Judah, to stay wherever he might find a place. So we've got a roving priest. We've got a Levite here who is looking for an opportunity. Well, this place is going to provide his opportunity. So this Levite on his journey comes up to the hill country of Ephraim, and he comes to the house of Micah. And so, hey, they've got a worship center, and they've got idols, and they've got funding for it. Thank you, Grandma. And so, hey, this looks like the place. And so Micah says to him as he goes by, "Where did you come from?" And he said, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to stay wherever I can find a place." At least he's honest about it. I'm out here looking for a position. I'm looking for a job. And so Micah says, "Well, dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me." So it's not a new thing that people call religious leaders a father. And we don't know anything about this man's age at this point, but be my spiritual leader and be my priest, because you're a Levite. We can get a Levite. We get one of the approved list of people to run this worship center of idolatry. "I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of clothes, and your maintenance." So he's going to have a place to stay, and he's going to probably have eat with the family. He's given his room and board. He's given some clothes, and he's given, as we say, 10 pieces of silver. So the cash part of his salary is 10 pieces. And again, Micah had stole 1,100. So yeah, this is a well-funded place, and he gets to be the father and the priest at this family worship center. And who knows how much importance it has in the community, but we've got security, we got maintenance and a cash salary and some clothes. He's all in. So the Levite agreed to live with the man, and the young man, right? The young man's going to be the father, right? So again, it's nothing new. Like when these Mormons come to your door and, "Hey, I'm Elder Smith. Elder Smith, are you old enough to shave yet?" I'm Elder Smith. Okay, thanks. But this young man is going to be his father and priest, but also he treats him pretty well. He said the young man became to him like one of his sons. So I'm sure he either lived in the house or near the house, and probably ate out of the kitchen. And so he was with this family, and he's got his place, and all is good until some fellas offer him a promotion, it seems. But anyway, so Micah consecrated the Levite. Do you get to consecrate yourself in your own picks? Is that how consecration works for the things of God? Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. And then Micah said, "Now I know the Lord will prosper me, seeing I have a Levite as a priest." Well, Levites, certainly the priests were Levites, but not all the Levites were priests. The Levites should have taken care of the spiritual business of the people, and they had a number of jobs to do. Of course, if they were at the tabernacle, later the temple, they would be the assistants and the like, and they would help the priest. But the things he's doing is much more priestly than actually Levitical, but this whole thing is sideways and corrupt from the start. And so the Levite is happily hired, happily on the case of Micah, and happily on the case of the Levite, and it all goes well for a bit. But then we find some folks for whom things have not been going so well come by, and we have people from the tribe of Dan. So they're looking for a land, and they end up finding a priest in their search. In verse 1, in those days, again it stresses, in those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days the tribe of the Danites was looking for an inheritance for themselves to live in. For until that day, an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession among the tribes of Israel. And so this helps date when exactly this took place, which seems to be pretty early in the time of the book of Judges. And there is as we recall from the end of Judges, beginning end of Joshua, beginning of Judges, there is some overlap. And the tribe of Dan They got the seventh lot. This is way back in Joshua 19. The seventh lot fell to the tribe of the sons of Dan according to their families. And then it starts listing off the cities of that. And it's cities like Escalon. And it's also other cities near Joppa, which are Elon, Eklon, Joppa. It's places of the Philistines. And so Dan got a hard draw on the division of land. It was a good draw in the sense of it was a good place. It was a bad draw in the sense the Philistines were there, and there are people who troubled Israel for a long time, deep into the reign of David. And so it says in the book of Joshua 19, in verse 47, after listing those cities, several of which we recognize as Philistine cities, it says, the territory of the sons of Dan proceeded beyond them. That's my New American Standard here. The New Revised Standard said the territory of the Danites was lost to them. Or the NIV says the Danites had trouble taking possession of their territory. I guess they did. For the sons of Dan went up to fought against Lachish and captured it. Then they struck it with the edge of the sword and possessed it and settled in it. And they called Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan, their father. And so there was a little tiny bit, one city of the many listed, that Dan was able to take, and there wasn't really room for them to take anymore and for room for them to live because of the Philistines. And so they end up heading out for easier pickings. Now, this story either happened when they couldn't take their land or happened just before they were given this land, which ended up being hard to take. But the whole tribe of Dan ends up way in the north. And so when you look at your 12 tribes of Canaan in later Bible maps, Dan is way up, almost in Lebanon, because that's what they could get. And so this is a story of them doing the getting. Verse 2, so the sons of Dan sent out from their family 5 men of their whole number, valiant men from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it, and said to them, go search the land. And they came into the hill country of Ephraim to the house of Micah and lodged there. So in their looking for another place, they end up at this prominent person's house. I'm sure he was evidently quite hospitable to them. He's not going to be happy with that he did that eventually, but he's hospitable to them, and they are impressed when they find his worship center there. In verse 3, when they came near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite, and they turned aside there and said to him, who brought you here, and what are you doing in this place, and what do you have to do here? And so they recognized by his voice, either they knew him personally, which I don't think that's probably the case, or they recognized he didn't have the local accent. If we recall, there are some pretty distinct ways of speaking among the Jews, the whole thing that we still call a shibboleth, where people from Ephraim said things one way and people from the other areas said things another way, and that's how they knew who was from Ephraim and who was not. And so this guy's in Ephraim, but I think they recognized by his voice he's not from Ephraim. So he's a stranger there, or at least he's not native there. So why? Who are you? Or at least who brought you here? What are you doing here? Tell us your story. And so he said to them, thus and so has Micah done to me. So he tells them the story about him getting the job there at the idolatrous worship center, which Micah has conveniently funded. And so he hired me, and I have become his priest. So I'm the priest of this house, this worship center. This is what I'm here to do, and help this family and do that. So they said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether our way on which we are going will be prosperous. And the priest said to them, now we don't know if he inquired of God and got an answer from God or what, but they said, ask God since you're a priest. And he says to them, go in peace. Whether he made that up or whether that God gave him that message, we don't know. But he said, go in peace. Your way in which you're going has the Lord's approval. Okay. So they got the answer they want. Of course, this priest seems to be pretty, congenial to everybody. And so they go looking for their land, and they find their new land. Verse 7, the beginning. And then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and they saw the people who were living there in security after the manner of the Sidonians. Well, that is not one of the tribes that the people were told to dispossess, but they were quiet and secure, and there was no ruler humiliating them for anything in the land. Well, in the Bronze Age, that's about as good as you can get. You got your own peaceful valley, and you're not being under the outside rule of anybody. But also now they are far from the Sidonians, and they had no dealings with anybody. So it's not just that they're not being oppressed by outsiders, they're also not connected. And so these folks say, hey, that's a nice valley. That's a nice place. And they've got a good thing there. We could do that. Verse 8, when they came back to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, again, you want to go take on these Sidonians who live in peace and probably aren't real practiced at war, or you want to take over all these Philistine places. What do you report? They said, arise. Verse 9, let's go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it's very good. And will you sit still? Do not delay. Go to enter and possess the land. When you enter, you will come to a secure people with a spacious land, for God has given it into your hand, the place where there is no lack of anything that's on the earth. And so by human reasoning, they say that looks a lot more attractive than what we got by lot from God. And so let's do that instead. And so let's just go there. And so the war party of Dan goes up, and they go by Micah's house on the way. Verse 11. Then from the people, or from the family of the Danites, from Zorah and Eshtaol, 600 men armed with weapons of war went out. So 600 men of war. If they took their family with them for resettlement, they're only making one trip, not going back, they probably have 2,000 to 3,000 total souls with them when you count women and children and the ones too old for war. And so I don't know if they made one trip or they just the warriors went the first time, but they go up in verse 12. They go up and camp at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. And therefore, they called that place Mahanath Dan to this day. Behold, it's west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. So they're going to waypoints that they know as they travel. We also note that even though they're a big war party, they're traveling through the hills and they're not traveling through the plains. And so either they're going intentionally to Micah's to do what they do, or they're taking the more secure route and taking the time to travel through the hills to get there. In either case, it doesn't speak well for them. When you can't move your army across open country, maybe you shouldn't be moving your army. But in any case, those men, then verse 14, then the 5 men who went to spy out the country of Laish said to their kinsmen, do you know that there in these houses is an ephod? Again, very expensive priestly garments is an ephod, and a house and household idols, and a graven image, and a molten image. Now, therefore, consider what you should do. Guys, just over there's a bunch of loot. What do you think we ought to do about that? They turned aside from there and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, to the house of Micah, and asked him of his welfare. 600 armed men with weapons of war, who were the sons of Dan, stood by the entrance to the gate. Well, that's not threatening at all, is it? Obviously not a social call. Now, the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up and entered there, and they took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten image, while the priest stood by at the entrance of the gate with the 600 armed men and the weapons of war. Well, I don't know if he was going to object very strongly or not, but especially not with that situation. And when these went to Micah's house and took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten image, the priest said, what are you doing? And they said, be silent. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. And so We got a new job offer, so come with. And to be a father and to be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest of the house of one man or to be the priest to a tribe and a family of Israel? So would you like a promotion? You're a Levite, we'll take you. And you just go with us. You're on our side now. And priest, I think, sees this as a good career move. One, he's not going to get killed that day for objecting strenuously. But secondly, he's not going to be the head of a, looted worship center where the idols are gone. And so, okay, so he goes. And so he gets a promotion, and off he goes. And the war party then takes off, and Micah is not going to be happy about this. Micah is going to object because, hey, what would you do if somebody steals your idols and your priest? Again, aren't we so glad that so little of our worship depends upon physical things, because everything physical can be taken and can be looted. And, what do we need, right? We need our faith. And the good news about your faith is it's portable, folks. Your faith is highly portable and highly personal. It cannot be taken from you. And so just get a new reprint of the book and your faith and just start back up again in a new place. But here they have taken the holy man. They've taken what they think are holy objects. They have looted this place. And so they took off. And they know there's going to be recriminations. And so in verse 21, they turned and departed, and they put their little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. Now, the other time this happens in Bible history, we remember when Israel himself, when Jacob is returning home, and he puts his livestock and his family in front of him as he's going to meet Esau. And we really find that a little bit off-putting because if there's going to be a problem, the women and children are going to take it in the knees first. And they're going to let him know that he should skedaddle with the more precious wife and children that are with him, right? Because you look at how he organized that. But in this case, it's the opposite. They know the trouble's coming from the back. They know that Micah is going to be coming down on them from the road that they've just left his house on. So they put themselves in between the trouble and their valuables. And so when they had gone some distance from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah assembled and overtook the sons of Dan. Well, we've all seen enough Westerns. It takes a little bit to organize the posse and ride out after the robbers. And so Micah and his boys catch up with the guys of Dan. And they cried to the sons of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter with you that you have assembled together?" So what's your problem, guys? Well, we know what the problem is. They know what the problem is. And he said, "Well, you have taken away my gods." Boy, isn't that a problem with idolatry, right? Somebody's always taking your gods. Hate it when that happens, don't you? Then you have to find some new gods. And all right. So they cried, "What's the matter with you? You have taken my gods," verse 24, "which I made, and the priest, and have gone away. And what am I to have besides? So how can you say to me, what is the matter with you?" What do you mean? What's the matter? You know what's the matter. That's why you guys are all armed here and why you guys are ready for us. And so Dan said to him, "Don't let your voice be heard among us." So we're not listening to you again. We do not want to hear your voice again, or else fierce men will fall upon you and you will lose your life with the lives of your household. So you want to press this matter? We'll just kill you. And we'll kill your family. Okay. Again, I've read the Westerns where things like this happen, where we're in the range war, the farmer and his family get killed. I've read about the Indian wars where this happens, and I've read lots of fiction where these things are threatened, and sometimes it happens. And then we're going to have, the one survivor is later going to come back and take revenge and all that. I've read this story a lot. really find it uncomfortable to read this story in reality, not in fiction, among the people of God. This is one of God's 12 tribes. This is a Levite, one of the ones who should be doing the spiritual work of Israel. How many commandments are we breaking? But there's no king, and everybody's just doing what's right in their own eyes. And this is what it gets to, what the fierce men can get away with, because they're fierce and they're strong. And in this case, there's 600 of them. And I don't know how many Micah had, but I don't think it was 600. And he wasn't ready for war. So Dan said, don't let your voice be heard, or fierce men will fall upon you again. Verse 25. You will lose your life and the lives of your household. So the sons of Dan went on their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. What else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? I guess you can complain to God. Although if you think God is that idol, you don't even have his presence in that sense anymore. And so these guys are successful in their looting of Micah on the way to their new land. And now they're going to go take the new land. And it's not any prettier picture of what they do to these Sidonians than it was what they did to people in Israel. Verse 27, they then took what Micah had made and the priests that belonged to him, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword. And they burned the city with fire. Well, that's what they threatened to Micah. That's what they actually did to these other people. And there was no one to deliver them because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. And it was in the valley, which is near Beth Rebath. Then they rebuilt the city and lived in it. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. So again, it's amazing at times how things are just recorded in Scripture, and there's not a lot of moral commentary, even when obviously that's pretty much what I'm doing tonight is moral commentary. But I think that is a moral commentary. Remember what this place used to be. I think that's a slap here in this history. And so later, of course, when Jeroboam sets up golden calf worship, he's going to set one of the places in Dan, and it appears they're going to, they welcome it. They've already had a history of things like that with priests who shouldn't be a priest, with worship that shouldn't be in that form, and violations of commandments that shouldn't be violated. They're already doing that. And then the other place, of course, they set up the worship was at Bethel, a place called, ironically, of course, the house of God, but also very close to Jerusalem, so that people would not go to Jerusalem. They'd have to walk right by that to get to Jerusalem. And so we have one more really stunning fact that's in verse 30. It says, the sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image. Well, of course they would. But then here's the part that seems stunning. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, and my New American Standard says here, the son of Manasseh. He and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of captivity in the land. So this family of priests, who shouldn't have been priests, they were Levites, not priests. This family of priests stayed until Israel fell. And so when golden calf worship came in under Jeroboam, they just apparently incorporated it right into what they were already doing. But one of the things that made Dan so a place, ready for that. But my New American Standard says it's this Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. I looked today and did a quick search of the 60-ish most common English Bibles. It doesn't say Manasseh in about 2/3 of them. It says Moses. Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. And we know that Moses had a son named Gershom. He had also a son named Eleazar. Gets a little confusing because Aaron, his brother, also had a son named Eleazar. Both of those sons were named when Moses and Aaron were apart. when Moses was in Midian. So I don't know if there must have been somebody important in their family that they both named a son Eleazar, but that is a different puzzle at times to solve. But most English translations say Moses. The Masoretic text, the Hebrew text that we use for most things, although there's a few places where people have made some corrections to it that we use, and it shows up in our English Bibles, says Manasseh. There's only one letter difference in Hebrew between Moses, and Manasseh. And it's this problem of what's the right name here? Is this the grandson of Moses? I think it probably is. But it's the scribes of later times appeared to want to protect the family name of Moses and put Manasseh there. This is an old textual dispute. About half the Greek copies of the Old Testament, so we're talking prior to the time of Christ, about half the Greek Old Testament say Moses and about half say Manasseh. It's just so much more logical that it's Moses. But the textual difference is, or the textual record is muddled. And so, in any case, we think about all the more tragic that this is, if it is Moses' grandson who's the priest here. Now, we know that Moses is the great nephew, the grandson of Aaron, Phineas. He was the chief priest at the tabernacle at this time. And so it chronologically fits for it to be Moses' grandson. And also this genealogy, we have the name of the father as Gershom. That's the name of Moses' son. It's most likely that it was Moses' own grandson who is this opportunistic and corrupt priest who worships with the idols and who just took whatever good job he could get. And verse 31, they set up for themselves Micah's graven image on which he had made, and all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. So there's a contrast between God's temple, which Aaron's grandson was the chief priest at, and up in Dan, this idolatrous worship, which continued through the entire period of Israel's history. Almost certainly, or at least predominantly, the evidence predominantly leans to, was the chief priest's cousin, the grandson of Moses. And so you think, what a bunch of corruption. What a sad, sad story. And the next story is worse. But such is the time of the book of Judges. God gives us this as warnings as to what I think we could be, what we are without living under God's guidance. Also, what a lesson for us continually of God's patience and of God's mercy to have dealt with these people for as long as he did and as graciously as he did. But that's the story of Dan and the mercenary priest named Jonathan, most likely the grandson of Moses. With that, we'll close, and we'll look forward to our next lesson.